Recent studies on both sides of the border have discovered a disturbing trend. Health officials have found that a number of those incarcerated have experienced significant traumatic brain injuries. And joining us now for more on this, Angela Colantonio. She's a senior scientist with the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute and Canadian Institutes for Health Research Chair in Gender, Work and Health, focusing on brain injury. Also here, Flora Matheson. She is a medical sociologist with a Centre for Research on Inner City Health in the Keenan Research Center of the Li Ka-shing Knowledge Institute of St. Michael's Hospital. Sorry, no time left. We've just given your titles. We have no time to talk anymore. Anyway, kidding. Welcome, both of you. Here we go. According to prison studies in the U.S., anywhere from 25% to 87% of inmates report having experiences a head injury or TBI compared to 8.5% of the general population. And the obvious place to start, Flora, on this is, why is it so much disproportionately higher in that prison population than in the general society?
Well, I'm not sure that we have a clear answer for this. Some of the reasons may be related to the symptoms of the brain injury itself. So after you've experienced a brain injury, there's a tendency for impulsivity, as well as emotional problems, aggressiveness, and that may put them in the position where they're in contact with the law, and so they end up within the prison system. Your
chances are therefore worse.
There's also the issue that there's a connection between substance abuse and brain injury, and so if people are using illicit drug use, and they also may end up in contact with the law.
Gotcha. Angela, anything to add to that about why so disproportionately higher?
That's a great summary. When you think about a brain injury, some of the things that can happen is problems with cognition, memory, problems with thinking, problems with attention, communication problems, and so inability to pick up social cues. Also, there are problems with, as Flora mentioned, in terms of emotion, regulating one's emotion. It's not uncommon to find that some persons with brain injury exhibit sexually inappropriate behaviors or violent behaviors, which can lead to problems with the law. The other thing, too, is there are some important aspects with respect to the impact on function, community integration. For instance, we found that for people with moderate to severe injuries, on average, the employment rate is around 40%. So a lack of employment can lead to a downward spiral and put one at risk for negative consequences.
We've been talking on this program about hockey and football, and that seems pretty obvious in terms of brain injuries. The people that you're studying, dealing with, how do they get brain injuries?
From what I've looked at in the research, it's very similar to the general population. There tends to be assaults. I'm involved with assaults,
so
but
it's
also
getting beaten up.
Also motor vehicle accidents.
In general, the main causes for brain injury are in at least in Canada, are falls, being struck by an object, motor vehicle crashes. About 20% are sports related, and 10 or 11% are due to intentional injuries like assaults. What we tend to see, like some studies we've done on forensic mental health population, the falls, we've seen the same trend, but in some studies we've seen that the assault rate is much higher.
Flora, what kinds of behaviors do prisoners with traumatic brain injury exhibit?
Going back to Angela's comments, very similar in terms of like memory issues, not understanding rules, and those issues are really problematic within the prison environment, which is based on rules and regulations. And so if they can't understand rules and can't interact well with other prisoners, then that creates havoc for them in terms of being able to be in programs on time, and just generally for the correctional staff not understanding that the issues are a health-related issue and not a defiance issue.
Right. I mean, being in jail is not a fun experience to begin with, but presumably if you've got TBI and you're in jail, your experience is going to be even worse than if you're just part of the regular prison population. Is that fair to say?
Right, because you don't adjust to the environment as well because of the regulations and the rules and everything that you have to try to remember and the interactions with people. It makes it very difficult for them to kind of follow along with what should be happening within the prison environment.
Mm-hmm. Do people who work in prisons, are they trained or made aware of what Flora just said, which is it's not a defiance issue, it's simply, I have a brain injury and I just can't cope? Do they know that?
Well, I know that, for instance, the Ontario Brain Injury Association went to Corrections Canada and has done some in-services. Our lab has done some in-services for parole officers. Actually, we have a research-informed play called After the Crash, a play about brain injury. We've done that at their conferences, but it seems more of a one-off thing versus a real comprehensive.
I want to read something here that neuroscientist David Eagleman had in the Telegraph. This is a couple of years back, but still seems germane. Here we go. It's time to let go of our intuitions about how people should behave and pay attention to how they do behave, to run our legal system as rigorously as a science experiment. Careful attention to detail will allow us to clean up the streets with less cost, slow the revolving doors of the penal system, and divert resources into effective programs rather than simply build more prisons. A brain-based approach can be more cost-effective, humane, and successful. If we desire our medical treatments to be biologically informed, shouldn't we demand the same from our courtrooms? Okay, let's get into how inmates with traumatic brain injury ought to be treated in an ideal world. Put some ideas on the table. In an ideal world, you'd like to see what?
I'd like to see people not get into prison. Like a lot of these injuries predate a life of crime. So let's get in there and intervene so that this negative consequence doesn't happen. Let people have the supports they need, the treatments, rehabilitation programs, support for families, especially a very vulnerable population like abused children. There needs to be greater awareness about what the consequences of even a mild brain injury can have, and a recognition that this can be a chronic condition for life that needs support.
I agree with Angela. I think we need to start diverting people from the prison system into the health system. That's where they should be, not in the prison system. We're talking about a population in the prisons that not only has traumatic brain injury, but has mental illness, has significant substance abuse. So a complex needs population that needs integrated care, and they should be diverted from the prison system as much as possible. When they're in the prison system, they need integrated care as well. And then as they come out of the prison system, they need supports in the community so that they can adapt and so they don't return to prison.
It's not like the healthcare system doesn't have a full plate already, though, you know?
It's true.
Angela Colantonio, Flora Matheson, thanks both for coming in at TVO tonight.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.